I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that the next close to 300 images that I'll be showing in the course of the next hour plus, I'm afraid, will be coming from the archives of the Palm Beach County Historical Society, which has its location in the 1916 county courthouse that is pictured there. So part two, we're going to go really from the land boom and bust of the 1920s, 100 years up until today. So it's an ambitious program. Starting with the boom, when Palm Beach really transformed into a very prominent national resort beyond the Flagler period. So we're moving beyond hotels into a period where people built private residences and in fact mansions on the island and in the town of Palm Beach. And now World War II is over. World War I rather is over. And Palm Beach County is poised for huge growth. And Palm Beach, the town, is poised for huge growth. This map shows what the county of Palm Beach looked like in 1921. And as you can see, it was a larger county at that point. It went all the way up to Stewart in the north and down to Deerfield in the south. But all of the communities were hugging the coast. The development of Florida and of Palm Beach was facilitated by a number of things, the end of World War I for sure. Secondly, the construction of Dixie Highway, which was a connected highways that led all the way from the Midwest down to Miami, that was put together between 1915 and 1929, largely at the instigation of the Miami developer, Carl Fisher. And another important factor was an amendment number 1 to the Florida Constitution. In the previous decade, federal government imposed its first income tax and estate tax, and Florida responded by amending its constitution to prohibit income tax and inheritance tax. So in order to change the current situation, which exists in Florida and another 7 states in the United States today, it would be necessary to amend the Constitution. But before we get into the real boom period of the 1920s, things were not stagnant during the 19-teens in the construction and development front. And one very important man in the future of Palm Beach, less direct than Henry Flagler, more indirect because the work that he started was carried on by future generations, was Henry S. Phipps Jr. Just like Flagler made his fortune in the oil business as a partner of Rockefeller in Standard Oil, Henry S. Phipps Jr. made his fortune as a partner of Andrew Carnegie.
Andrew Carnegie, I didn't know that.
Which was sold to
Oh, I froze.
Morgan in 1901, making Henry S. Phipps Jr. a very wealthy man. And he spent a lot of his money then on real estate investments all around the United States, but in particular in Palm Beach and Southern Florida. In Palm Beach, for his own personal use, he purchased 1,000 feet of oceanfront property north of Wells Road, which he subdivided and which he gave in parts to his family members. And in 1916, 2 of those family members built houses. On the top by Francis Burrell Hoffman, that's the architect of Vizcaya down in Miami. He designed Hiomah for Henry Phipps, the son of Henry S. Phipps Jr. Yes, and below that is Los Incas, which was built by an unknown architect for Michael R. Grace, who was the father-in-law of John Schaffer Phipps, another son of Henry S. Phipps Jr. Further north, all of these are on South Ocean Boulevard, north of Wells Road, south of the Beach Club. Further north, the Villa Artemis was built once again by Francis Burrell Hoffman for a daughter of Henry S. Phipps Jr., Amy Guest. And you can see from this aerial photo taken in 1932 that while these were all ocean to lake estates, there was mainly water or marshland between the 2 shores of the island of Palm Beach. And you can see a huge lagoon behind Villa Artemis, which was traversed by causeways, as you can see here. Outside the Phipps area, Blythe Dunes was developed just by another architect, Harold Hastings Mundy, for Robert Dunn Douglas. Much further south now, south of the, maybe 4 miles further south on the island of Palm Beach, just south of today's Bath and Tennis Club. You'll recall if you attended 2 weeks ago that Charles Bingham bought the 160-acre site Figalis from George Potter and built the house, which he named Figalis in 1833. 20 years later, he gave, about 20 years later, he gave 17 acres to one daughter, Mrs. Blossom, and another 17 acre to another daughter, Frances Bingham Payne Bolton, who built on her estate Casa Apava. And the architect was J. Abram Garfield, who was the son of President Garfield. This is a view of Casa Apava from Lake Worth, and this is a view from the ocean. But the two people who really are responsible most for transforming Palm Beach into the resort that we know today arrived in 1919, 1918, just literally at the end of World War I. Paris Singer was the 23rd child of Mr. Isaac Singer, who invented the Singer sewing machine and made a great fortune. And Paris Singer was born in Paris, hence his name, and he spent most of his adult life in Europe and England until he moved to New York for the first time to the United States in 1914 at the beginning of World War I. And in 1918, he moved down to Palm Beach. And he brought with him his friend, the architect, Addison Mizner, who had a practice in New York City. Both of them were in middle age. Both of them were ripe for an adventure. And the adventure that they started on was developing the Everglades Club. Mizner designed it and built it for Paris Singer. And it was built at the bottom of what you see here is a Royal Park addition, which was laid out, platted between 1908 and 1918 by Cap Demick, the first mayor of Palm Beach. The top arrow shows where Royal Palm Way is. The bottom arrow shows where Worth Avenue, which was named in 1923, where Worth Avenue is. It's kind of looping around the little bay at the bottom of Worth Avenue. And the Everglades Club is just south of Worth Avenue. And this is an earlier map that dates back to 1907 that shows what it looked like before the Royal Park addition was laid out. So the Everglades Club is in fact located exactly where the alligator farm, Alligator Joe's alligator farm was, on what was then known as the Hammond Homestead. This is what the alligator farm, and there's Alligator Joe himself, looked like at the bottom of what's now Worth Avenue. And Hiram Hammond and William Lanehart filed the first two homestead claims in the future Palm Beach back in 1873. And they shared a shack much like this one, made of palmetto fronds. These are not the two of them. One of them is a cousin or a brother of Mr. Lanehart, but they looked much like this. And they had adjoining 160-acre tracts of land, which they acquired through the Florida Homestead Act. Flash forward 45 years, here are the two gentlemen now. And Hiram Hammond sold his 160-acre estate for $1 million in 1918. So there's the Everglades Club, which really was to define the style of Palm Beach architecture for the next decade and beyond. Pointing to it at the top of that little cove that we showed earlier at the bottom of Wyeth Avenue. And the style that was developed by Addison Mizner has come to be known as the Mediterranean Revival style. He used it not only to build the Everglades Club, but the adjacent building. So this is the north-facing facade on the south side of Wyeth Avenue that was redone by Mizner in 1925. On the north side was built the shopping arcades, which were the first shopping arcades on Wyeth Avenue, by the way. It developed from the west to the east, the shopping part of Wyeth Avenue. And the highlight of it is Villa Mizner, which is this tower on the left, and that is where Addison Mizner resided. His offices were actually on the adjacent building just to the right on the second floor above the arcade. And just west of Villa Mizner, Mizner designed the wonderful Via Parigi, and Parigi means Paris in Italian, so named after his patron and friend, Paris Singer. So the 1920s were largely defined by the architects, and I'm going to highlight who the architects were. Certainly the most important of all was Addison Mizner, who is credited with building 67 structures, not just homes, in Palm Beach, another 27 in Boca Raton, and another 10 elsewhere in Palm Beach. And he built a few others outside of Palm Beach County. His first commission after the Everglades Club, which made a huge impact, was to build El Mirasol for the Edward Stotesburys, just south of Los Incas, which I showed you earlier, just north of Wells Road, once again on the ocean on a huge 42-acre ocean to lake estate. And when it was built, there existed Ocean Boulevard between the estate and the ocean. And for those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, you'll recall that Ocean Boulevard was built the entire length of Palm Beach Island, from the inlet down to Del Rey between 1912 and 1916. And so it was between all of these houses that I'm showing you now and the ocean when they were built. So in 1919, the Phippses sold some of their land to the brothers Charles and Gurney Munn, who had Mizner design their two buildings just north of Casa Bendita. And what you see here, on the left, we showed you Piedmont that was built in 1916 for Henry Phipps. On the right, one of Henry S. Phipps Jr.'s sons, John Phipps, built Casa Bendita, a magnificent estate on 28 acres. This is the eastern elevation facing the ocean, and this is what you see from the west, with these wonderful arcades. And if you ever go by Bessemer Trust Building on Royal Palm Way, you will recognize these arches because that is a vague nod to the design of Casa Bendita. Further north on North Ocean Boulevard was the towers built just south of Villa Artemis. Again, this is a wonderful 1932 photo that shows you how all of these buildings were lined up directly on the ocean and how they all went through to the lake to the west. This, the top arrow shows you County Road, and the bottom arrow points to Lake Trail. Further north, in fact, on the top left corner, you can see the Palm Beach Country Club's golf course, and just north of that, Mizner built his largest project, Playa Riente, Laughing Beach, for Joshua Costin, who very soon thereafter sold it to Anna Dodge, who owned it for the next 30 plus years. It had 70 rooms. It was huge. This is the view from the west, which gives you an idea of its bulk. and the view from the beach. And this property was built and remained directly on the beach. Further north on North Ocean Boulevard as well, Mizner built La Garita for Rodman Wanamaker, who 10 years later sold it to Joseph Kennedy. Moving back to the Worth Avenue area, further west of the Everglades Club, these two Venetian villas were designed by Mizner. One Casa Leone for Leonard Thomas, and right next to it, the Villa des Cygnes for Barclay Warburton. Further south, and we're moving south now, on South Ocean Boulevard, just after the turn, about a mile south of Worth Avenue, Mizner built El Solana for Harold Vanderbilt. And literally next to that, the magnificent Casa Anna was built for George Rasmussen. And this is the view from the ocean. And this is the view from South County Road with its extraordinary external staircase. Continuing south on South Ocean Boulevard at the corner of South Ocean and Clarendon Avenue, Mizner designed the Casa Florencia, named after Dr. Satterthwaite's wife, Florence, in 1923. And just south of the Bath and Tennis Club, Mizner designed La Bellucia for Willie
That's not yours?
Kingsley, and whose wife's name was, you guessed,
is here.
Lucia. Another impact with a architect with a huge impact on Palm Beach was Maurice Facio, who was born in Switzerland and trained in Zurich before he moved to the United States. Worked in New York, then moved to Palm Beach, and had a wonderful 20-year career cut short by illness. He considered his masterpiece to be the Casa della Porta del Paradiso on the Via del Mar, which features his characteristic coquina corral cut stone facade. A little further south on South Ocean Boulevard at the corner of Via Bellaria, he built Casa Aleda for Mortimer Schiff. This is also known as the ham and cheese house because it's got bands of coquina stone and brick, giving it a white and red or beige and red look. Mortimer Schiff's wife's name was Adele, Aleda backwards. And even further south, another 2 miles further south, Mizner built El Palmetto for Joseph Widener. Further north, sorry, that was not Mizner, that was Facio that built El Palmetto for Joseph Widener. Further north, just south of today's Beach Club, Facio built Ohica for Otto Herman Kahn, Ohica coming from O, Otto, H-E, Herman, and K, Kahn, on the ocean. And it's not Palm Beach, but it's such a remarkable estate. I must mention it. Facio built the wonderful Casa Ava on Hypoluxo Island on what is now known as Manalapan Point for Consuelo Vanderbilt in 1934. Another important architect in Palm Beach's history, Marion Sims Wyeth, built over 100 houses. And you'll notice he lived until 1992. So he had an extremely long career and varied career. It started out when he designed a house for Edward F. Hutton and his wife, Marjorie Merriweather Post on Gulfview Road, which was just west of Everglades, the Everglades Club. It was owned by that land, that road and all the land on it was owned by Paris Singer, and he sold a lot to E.F. Hutton and spouse, who hired the young Marion Sims Wyeth to design a house they named Hogarcito, little home, which was quite spectacular. And in order to protect their neighborhood, E.F. Hutton and Wyeth bought the road and all the land on it from Parisinger and created something called the Gulfview Road Development Company. And the primary architect was E.F. Hutton, and he designed 5 on spec and another 5 houses all on Gulfview Road and an additional 8 houses on nearby Brillo Way. But his biggest commission was clearly to build Mar-a-Lago for Edward F. Hutton and Marjorie Merriweather Post, which was built on an ocean to lake estate, Mar-a-Lago ocean to lake estate of 17 acres. And it's actually the only ocean lake estate that is still intact from the 1920s. Cielito Lindo is just north of Mar-a-Lago, which is even grander, one might argue, but of a similar scale, both the house and the estate of 16 acres for James Donahue and his wife, Jessie Woolworth of the Woolworth dime store fortune. Extraordinary looking landscaping and grounds of Cielito Lindo. Another great architect, Joseph Urban, who only in Palm Beach, he's an Austrian architect, he was only in Palm Beach for 2 years, but in those 2 years, he designed 3 of the most iconic buildings of Palm Beach, which still exist. He was brought in to help build Mar-a-Lago along with Marion Sims Wyeth, and he definitely added a very theatrical aspect to it. His career actually was primarily as a set designer for the Florence Ziegfeld Follies, was Joseph Urban's. Wonderful aerial view. And just to the south of Mar-a-Lago, Urban designed roughly at the same time. And it's actually quite interesting to see this photo here, because you can tell that he has a kind of fan-shaped shape to both Mar-a-Lago on the north, at the top, and the Bath and Tennis Club at the bottom, reminiscent, no doubt, of his theatrical training. And at the very bottom, arrow points to Bellucia, designed by Mizner. This is a wonderful aerial photo from 1927 pointing at the Bath and Tennis Club and Mar-a-Lago and the Southern Boulevard Bridge to the left. The third building that Urban designed, this one also still intact. The photo is not from the earliest days, it was from 1939, but the wonderful Paramount Theater, and it too follows that fan-like shape that was so characteristic of Urban's designs. Howard Major had a long career, but is certainly best known for creating Major Alley and anything in 1925. It's also remarkable because unlike many of his contemporaries, he eschewed the Mediterranean Revival style and went with the Bermudian style architecture that you can see here in Major Alley, which consists of 6 small Bermuda style villas. John Volk, I will mention him from time to time. He was also very long-lived and professionally very active during his long life, and was responsible for over 1,000 commissions in Palm Beach and the vicinity, and I'll mention some of his designs later. Hotels that were built in the 20s. The 20s were when it all happened. So this second Breakers Hotel, after the first one burned down, was built in 1904. And to the left, you see the casino, which is what they called beach clubs back then. And casinos were called beach clubs, and beach clubs were called casinos in 1921. And it all came crashing down on March 18th, 1925. So on the right, you see the smoke and embers from the breakers fire. And on the left, there's a huge wind, as you could tell from that video, blowing to the west, northwest. And embers from the breakers landed, alas, on the Palm Beach Hotel, which was another wooden structure built on Lake Worth. And it burned to the ground, as well as did the breakers. But amazingly, the new Breakers Hotel, the one that we know today, was built in just 11 months by New York architects Schultz and Weaver. And their style was copied, as you can see, at the Hotel Nacional in Havana, just a few years later. But it turns out that that was actually quite a common approach to designing hotels, because the Hotel Alba, which went up just across the island on the site of the old Palm Beach Hotel, also looks quite similar in design to the new Breakers Hotel. The Alba Hotel was renamed the Ambassador Hotel in 1929, and finally the Biltmore Hotel in 1934. And a new hotel called the Palm Beach Hotel, but nothing to do with the owners or location of the one that burnt down with the breakers, went up on Sunrise Avenue in 1926. And this arrow is pointing to it. It's a very long hotel and interesting. And just to the right of it is St. Edward Church. And just one block south on Sunset Avenue, the much more modest Algomac Hotel was constructed in 1926, later changed its name to the Bradley Place Hotel. It was right across from Bradley's Beach Club, which was a gambling establishment and probably was owned by E.R. Bradley. I'm not certain about that. And it's now called the White Elephant.
Are you kidding me?
Further south, you'll recall that Henry Flagler died in 1913, and his wife died not long thereafter in 1917, and she bequeathed Whitehall to her niece, who sold it, and to developers who decided to transform it into a hotel. And in 1926, they built a 10-story tower behind it, and it became the Whitehall Hotel for the next 30 years. A view of it from Lake Trail. In what we call now Midtown Palm Beach, on Brazilian Avenue, the Brazilian Court Hotel was built around that same time. Originally, its entrance was on Brazilian Avenue. It's now moved to where? Not Brazilian, Chilean Avenue. On right nearby on Coconut Row, the Lido Venice Hotel went up at the same time. The amount of construction in the 1920s is absolutely staggering. Lido Venice Hotel, now the Chesterfield. Other historic buildings that went up in Palm Beach in the 1920s from north to south. St. Edward Church on South Ocean Boulevard, Catholic church. On Royal Poinciana Way, the Garden Theater, which now houses the Palm Beach Bookshop. Further south on South Ocean Boulevard, Bethesda by the Sea. Even further south, just north of Royal Palm Way, the First National Bank building. John Volk designed the part with the pediment on the left here as well. And just next south of that, or on Coconut Row and Seaview Avenue, Palm Beach Public School went up on the north side of this, on the east side of the street. On the west side of the street, in 1929, Palm Beach Junior High went up, which now houses the Dixon Education Building of the Four Arts, the campus on the lake. And while we're on that street, a little bit further east on Seaview Avenue, Palm Beach Private School was designed by Marion Sims Wyeth in this wonderful Art Deco style in 1931. Now we get back to the Royal Park addition that we talked about earlier in the context of the Everglades Club. Well, on the right, you see there's an arrow pointing to Town Square. And the Town Hall Square was finally developed in 1925 with the construction of Town Hall. And this is looking at the south end of it. That's actually where the Town Hall was. And at the north end of it, there was a fire station. And later on, I think in the 60s, the gap in between was filled in. And this building was built by Harvey and Clark. Both buildings were built by Harvey and Clark, West Palm Beach architectural firm that built a number of buildings, both in Palm Beach and West Palm Beach, including these commercial buildings in the Royal Park Addition in Palm Beach, the Palm Way building on Royal Palm Way, the corner of Royal Palm Way and South Ocean Boulevard. So that's where La Goulou is now located. The Daily News building on Brazilian Avenue, and the Buckley building on Chilean Avenue, where Scotty's Liquors has been for a good long time, and the Historic Inn is located above it. And just north of the what used to be the fire station, Mizner designed the memorial fountain in honor in memory of Henry Flagler Morrison and Elisha Newton Demick, the two most important men in the history of Palm Beach. Much further south, now we're probably now 5 miles further south, there's the Lake Worth Casino and Baths. And I mention it for the reason that this little chunk of real estate was sold to Lake Worth, the town of Lake Worth, which was located on the west side of Lake Worth, and had no beach access until they acquired land from the Brailsford brothers, and they built on that land ultimately the Lake Worth Casino and Baths, and that is their only little bit of property on Lake Worth on the ocean, which is why they call themselves now, they changed their name to Lake Worth Beach, but it's only a quarter of a mile from north to south. And to get there and to transport the building materials, they built the Lake Worth Bridge in 1919. I mention this too because Palm Beach carries on for another 2 miles south of there. It's interrupted only for that quarter mile where the Lake Worth Casino is. Then the town of Palm Beach resumes for 2 more miles before you get to the border of the next southern town, which is called South Palm Beach. Then the bust. The good times stopped. And there were 2, of course, major events that brought the good times in Palm Beach and so much of Florida to a stop. The first was the dramatic 1928 hurricane, Category 4 hurricane, 150-mile-an-hour winds, 19 inches of rain fell in 4 hours.
Is it important? Know what it is. I don't know.
Can watch this? Are you okay? Anything to help you?
So there was significant damage caused by this hurricane all over Florida. But in Palm Beach, this is a shot of Gus Bass on the left and the pier, the Palm Beach Pier on the right, looking north on South Ocean Boulevard. This is just next to Worth Avenue, where a sailboat was blown up on land. Clematis Street, Main Street in West Palm Beach. Palm Beach Yacht Club, the dock destroyed completely. Remember, we referred just a moment ago to the Lake Worth Bridge built in 1919, totally destroyed by the hurricane. But the worst damage was out west. And there was this phenomenon where the wind blew the water to the north end of the lake. And then it came splashing back to the south end of the lake, just like it would do in a bathtub, creating a 30-foot wave that came along at 100 miles an hour. And it overwhelmed a very small 8-foot high earthen burn that had been built on the south lip of the lake to prevent water from seeping south, so the land could be developed for agricultural purposes. And unfortunately, there were thousands of migrant workers there to harvest sugarcane primarily, and they were in makeshift housing, and they were, people estimate, because nobody knows, 3,000 people drowned south of Lake Okeechobee. And as a result of that, that led to the construction of the Hoover Dike, which took over 30 years to build, but it goes around the entire circumference of Lake Okeechobee. Huge project, which was actually inaugurated in 1961 by President Hoover, who had initiated it 30 years before. Back in Palm Beach, the 1,000-foot long pier that was in front of the breakers was destroyed. The bleachers and the fields in between the two hotels were destroyed. The arrow points to the Royal Poinciana Hotel. And there, the arrow points to a wing, which was severely damaged in the humongous Royal Poinciana Hotel. And it was removed, the debris was removed, and it was replaced by the slat house, which we will see referred to again later. Another casualty of the 1928 hurricane was Ocean Boulevard. This is what that stretch that I showed you earlier with all the wonderful mansions built by the Phipps family and others north of Wells Road. Well, this is what happened to that stretch of Ocean Boulevard. In the distance, you can see the breakers. And the owners of that stretch petitioned the city to not rebuild the town, to not rebuild South Ocean Boulevard on that stretch of land, but to, in fact, expand, enlarge, widen South County Road to replace it. And that is, in fact, what happened. So it was only since 1928 that all of those estates, and on the right, you see Stotesbury, Phipps, Henry Phipps, Margarita Phipps, Casa Bendita was named after Dita Phipps.
Look at all the Phipps.
And so you can see here now all of those all of those properties that we discussed earlier, they are directly on the ocean following the hurricane in this wonderful 1932 aerial photo. And that arrow points simply to County Road, which became the front door or the primary entrance to these estates. El Mirasol, the Stotesbury's estate, had its gate originally on North Ocean Boulevard. And you can see just how long the driveway was, 42 acres, 43 acre estate. And the new gate was built on North County and still stands today. The second terrible thing that happened in the 1920s to bring the boom to a halt was, of course, the real estate crash of 1929. The developers. So yes, Paris Singer was a developer, to be sure. Not only did he develop Worth Avenue, creating the first shopping arcades next to his hotel, but did he develop what was known as Gulf Road early. Later changed his name to Gulf View Road, and then they combined Gulf and View into a single road that is known today as Gulf View Road. And he also built the so-called Singer Addition, which is highlighted, the middle of which was Middle Road. And given the huge success that he had with those developments, he got ambitious. And you've heard of Singer Island on the north side of Lake Worth Inlet. Well, it was named after Paris Singer because he teamed up with another developer, Mr. Kelsey, who developed Lake Shore on the north side, the west side of Lake Worth
That's pretty awesome.
north of Riviera Beach to acquire this land with aspirations of developing it and transforming it into the new Palm Beach. And the heart of it was going to be the Blue Heron Hotel, which was designed by Mizner. But unfortunately, construction came to a screeching halt and a building remained incomplete in 1927. Ultimately, it would be, and look at Singer Island at that point, it is a giant beach. But there were great plans to build golf courses, marinas, and the rest of it, none of which came to fruition at that time. It all happened in the 1950s, actually. So the other great developer, aspiring developer was Addison Mizner, who had been around seeing so much development in Palm Beach. He wanted to become not only a designer and architect, but a developer. And he created the Mizner Development Corporation and got a lot of his clients and others to invest in it and buy a lot of land in the new town of Boca Raton. And it was originally incorporated in 1924, and they spelled it like it's pronounced, Boca Raton. In 1925, they dropped the E, but kept the pronunciation. And here's Mizner Development Corporation's ads. You can see just how ambitious his plans were for developing Boca Raton. He actually did build, in addition to whatever I said, 25 houses there, but his principal construction there was to build the Cloister Inn, which still exists, much enlarged, so that investors could come and stay there and buy their properties. But unfortunately, that too came to a crash with the rest of the bust, and Mizner went bankrupt, as did Singer. The Phipps family, the third and last developer that I'll mention. I talked about John S. Phipps Jr. Well, he bought a lot of real estate, both in Palm Beach, and I've read that he owned as much as 1/3 of the land in Palm Beach. The family and its investment vehicles, Bessemer Properties, Palm Beach Company, and other companies, in addition to a lot more real estate south of here down to Miami. But just to talk about a few developments they did in Palm Beach, they were responsible for Phipps Plaza and the two buildings on either side of the entrance to Phipps Plaza, 264 South County Road, which will be the new Carriage House Club that's supposed to open shortly, and the Plaza building on the north side, both of which were designed by Addison Mizner. Further south of Palm Beach, they developed the town of Gulfstream and built the Gulfstream Golf Club designed by Addison Mizner. 1930s, there was a rebound in Palm Beach. It was a gentle rebound. The growth that we saw in the 1920s would never be seen again until perhaps the 2020s. But what happened in the 1930s? Well, really the last tangible signs of the Flagler era, the real Flagler era, disappeared in the 1930s. So the three arrows here, on the one on the left points to the railroad tracks that came across from West Palm Beach to deliver guests to the two hotels. The arrow on the right, top right, points to the Royal Poinciana Hotel, and the arrow on the right corner points to the Florida East Coast Railway spur that led from the train station West Palm Beach to the hotels. And it was a. I don't think so. So what happened? All of them were demolished. In 1934, the demolition of the huge Royal Poinciana Hotel with its 1,081 rooms started. It was made of wood, and while the breakers had burned down twice in 30 years, this hotel survived, and it was only lost to demolition. So this is a photo of the train tracks and the train station on the right, and the beach club, E.R. Bradley's Beach Club on the left. This is a shot of the little terminal for the train station
Is this one?
on Main Street. So
Okay.
on the left, on the right side, you had the tracks, and on the left side, you had Main Street, although it looks like maybe the tracks are it's the other way around. I'm not certain about that. The arrow in the last slide and in this slide are both pointing to the water tower, which was there for a good long time into the 50s. I think I remember seeing it growing up here in the 1950s. The railroad track was removed, and as you can see here, in its place was built a road, a brand new road leading to a brand new bridge. And on the right is the old, on the other side of the median strip, is what used to be called Main Street. And the name was changed to Royal Poinciana Way on both sides of the street, more or less mimicking Royal Palm Way. Even though it's called Royal Poinciana Way, the palms that were ultimately planted there are royal palms, not Royal Poinciana palms. A postcard from the 20s or the 30s that shows you what it looked like. And at the bottom, at the very top, I should say, of Royal Poinciana Way, you have the post office, which was built by a WPA program in 1936. And the Flagler Memorial Bridge replaced the railroad bridge of Henry Flagler. And finally, once the hotel was gone, bridge was up, Coconut Row, not Coconut Nut Row, was extended north to Royal Poinciana Way. It did not go the stretch between Barton Road and Royal Poinciana Way until after the Royal Poinciana Hotel was demolished. And you can see the yellow outline of the Royal Poinciana Hotel, and Coconut Row goes basically through its ballroom. So you can see that the hotel was set very far back, from much farther back than one would expect from the banks of Lake Worth. A shot, an aerial from West Palm Beach in the foreground, and Biltmore on the other side of the new bridge. Other things in the 30s, the Society of the Four Arts was founded in 1936, and they built their first headquarters in 1938. Maurice Facio built this beautiful building, now the library. And at the north end of Palm Beach, this is a map. We showed you the Dillman Estate, which is Playa Oriente, to the left of the arrow. And as you can see, that's South Ocean Boulevard that goes left to right. But there's no development there in 1929. Well, that changed. A lot of the north end of Palm Beach was developed in the 30s, or it started in the 30s. And those huge, vast, empty, wet lagoons and marshy areas had to be filled in to permit their development. And here's a map from 1941, and you can see that virtually all of the streets in the north end have been laid out by 1941. The arrow points to the Craggan Estate. Those of you who were here last week will recognize reference to the Garden of Eden that was built by the Craggans, and their wonderful house with its 35 acres of gardens. The house was called the Rêve d'été. And it was ultimately acquired. They sold in 1925, and it was subdivided. And the three roads named after it were created: Garden Road, Eden Road, and Adam Road. There were buildings built in the residences built in the 1930s, but on a totally different scale and very different style from the grand mansions of the 1920s in the Mediterranean revival style of Mizner and others. And this building here, built in a very much Art Deco style, was built in 1936 by Maurice Facio, and it actually won a prize in Paris in 1938 for its strict and beautiful Art Deco architecture. So the style of architecture started to change dramatically in the 1930s. Big development started in the 30s, but did not finish until much later. This is a photo of Lone Cabbage Island.
26.
To the left is a golf course, the Everglades Club golf course. There's another shot of it with the golf course behind it. Lone Cabbage Island boatworks were located on it in the old days, and it was not inhabited. It was purely for boatworks purposes until it was acquired by the Bessemer Properties, and they determined to develop it. And in 1938, they substantially enlarged it, built bulkheads, and added a lot of sand, to build up the south end of this island. And just on the top there, you see Tarpon Island, which was built at the same time. But this shows it in 1938 once again, and you can see the bridge to it was constructed. But work was interrupted because of World War II. Here's a wonderful aerial shot with Palm Beach at the bottom, West Palm Beach to the north, Clear Lake, which is the source of our fresh water, with the arrow, and you can see that there was nothing west of Clear Lake in 1938. All of that was about to change. 1940, the population of the entire state of Florida was less than 2 million. And the population of the entire county of Palm Beach was 80,000. It was still extremely small. World War II broke out. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, we declared war on December 11th, 1941. And Palm Beach became, or Florida as a whole, became very important for the military, with 172 different military installations throughout the state, and over 2 million servicemen and women trained in Florida. Just before the war, the Palm Beach County Armory was built in West Palm Beach, which a lot of training took place there during the war. And that is the same armory that became the Armory Art Center in 1987. Morrison Field, our first airfield or first airport in the Palm Beach area, had only opened in 1936. And in 1940, Morrison Army Airfield took over the northern half of the field. And north of Palm Beach County, just inside Martin County, Camp Murphy was created as a radar training school. And that is now where Jonathan Dickinson State Park is located. Back in Palm Beach, this is a view looking from a hotel probably in West Palm Beach, over the lake, over the middle bridge, over the island, and you can see in the distance a dozen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ships hugging the coast as they're going north. There was a huge amount of shipping traffic along our coast because the Gulf Stream is 5 miles offshore, and it's the closest point to the continent of North America at Palm Beach County. And as a result, it was easy picking for the German submarines. So believe it or not, during this 3-month period between February and May 1942, 24 ships were sunk off the coast of Florida by German submarines.
Look at that.
Another military installation in Palm Beach County was, you've seen the Jupiter Lighthouse. Well, just next to it, a Station J was built, which is actually what remains today, not the lighthouse, but of the buildings where the Loxahatchee Historical Center is located. And it was built, and it housed a radar detection unit. So thanks to that radar detection unit, our troops were able to identify German submarines location and managed to destroy by sending out, telling our airplanes where to go and bomb them. They were able to destroy 67 U-boats in 2 months in 1943, and that pretty much brought the destruction of our shipping lanes to a halt. This is a shot from Palm Beach again. Here we are in Palm Beach. In the distance is the Palm Beach Pier with all of these military vehicles lined up. The Breakers Hotel became the Ream General Hospital during the war, and injured soldiers would come back there for rehabilitation, for treatment and physical rehabilitation. And at the Biltmore Hotel in 1944, the women's, I think it was the Navy outfit, Semper Fidelis
Or maybe.
Army Reserve, I think it must have been, were trained there. And then in 1945, the Biltmore became the U.S. Naval Hospital. On South Ocean Boulevard at the corner of Wyeth Avenue, a canteen called Volunteers for Victory was opened for servicemen. On the civilian side, 1941, the Norton Gallery of Art was built by Marion Sims Wyeth, built by Mr. Norton, but designed by Marion Sims Wyeth, just across the Middle Bridge in West Palm Beach.
41.
And Ted Stone opened his fabled bar Taboo on Wyeth Avenue, which still exists, albeit in a different location on Wyeth Avenue. After World War II, Edward R. Bradley, who had set up the Beach Club, I think in 1898, and it was one of the most popular places to go in Palm Beach for nearly 50 years. And he finally died. And as Joe Kennedy said, Palm Beach has lost its zipperoo. And his wife had predeceased him and they had no children. So he very nicely donated his club and residence to the town of Palm Beach. And they became the Bradley Park at the bottom of Royal Poinciana Way. The arrow is pointing to it there.
Properly ride our bikes through. I think.
On the north end of the island, here we are after World War II. Peanut Island, Singer Island up top left, totally barren, but actually substantially expanded and ripe for development, as was on the right side at the top, the north end of Palm Beach. Some of you will remember Annie's Dock, which was at the very northern tip, couldn't go any further. She lived there and sold goodies as well as gasoline and other things, bait for many years, 40 years. A little further south, Jack Mitchell opened the wooden, wonderful Coral Beach Club, which was a year-round club right on the ocean. At the top right, that's Palm Beach Country Club golf course just north of it.
Oh, I paid you last time $80. So I don't owe you $160 because you stayed on.
And in 1947, the Embassy Club, which had been built or designed by Mizner, was purchased by the Four Arts, and it became their primary headquarters. And they converted their previous headquarters into the King Library, which it still is today. And in 1993, in the same neighborhood, just east of the Embassy Club, they purchased the Embassy Apartments, also designed by Addison Mizner at the same time, the same year, 1925.
His designs.
1947, the Colony Hotel went up, designed by architect Byron Simonson. And at the distance behind it, you can see first the
He says it looks
Lido pools, and then the
torn, but
Palm Beach Pier. Another hurricane came along, 1947. In fact, two. South Ocean Boulevard, looking at the pier again. This is with Mar-a-Lago on the right, and straight ahead, you've got the Bath and Tennis Club. Terrible damage on South Ocean Boulevard. Terrible damage to the Bath and Tennis Club. That's the swimming pool on the right.
1947. Wow.
And there were winners and losers in that 1947 hurricane. Just before the hurricane, Jean Lawrence had designed the Ambassador Hotel on the stretch south of Widener's Curve, in fact, Sloan's Curve, actually, south of Sloan's Curve, named after Alfred Sloan, who had an estate, head of MIT, and General Motors, rather, who had an estate there. And so the curve after the estate was named after him. And in that empty space, because you can see here, there's nothing going on except the Ambassador Hotel, and on the which is right on South Ocean Boulevard, right in front of it, between it and the beach. But after the 1947 hurricane, once again, South Ocean Boulevard was destroyed south of Sloan's Curve, and it was rebuilt along the lake instead of along the beach. Therefore, all of a sudden, the Ambassador had direct beach access for the first time. Back to Everglades Island, and you can see here the southern part of the island has been filled in, and now Bessemer Properties filled in the northern half of the island, or a third of the island, and completed the project, creating 90 lots for sale, including a dozen on Island Road leading to Everglades Island and Tarpon Island. Another hurricane in 1949.
2 years later.
Only 2 years later, and they can come with unpredictable frequency. So, beware. So this is a shot of Holy Trinity Church, just across the middle bridge. 1949, the Crippled Children's Society on Royal Palm Way went up, designed by Gustav Maas. The second floor was added by John Volk in 1955. Now, finally, we get to officially 1950 in our chronology here. And the 1950s were a period of huge growth, 100% growth in Palm Beach County. And subsequent decades experienced also dramatic growth. Largely, it was a result of three things. One, returning servicemen. The war was over. 2 million of them had trained in Florida during the war, and many of them decided to come back and make it their homes after the war. And the advent of air conditioning made a huge difference, as did fumigation. Those of you who have been here for a good long time will remember that mosquitoes used to be a big issue here. Fortunately, well, because so much of 5 miles of the western part, eastern part of Palm Beach have been paved over, there's really very little water from them to grow in. So mosquitoes are not much of an issue anymore, but they certainly were, and everything was screened in the old days. 1950s photo, again, just as a reference, there's the Royal Poinciana Hotel, sorry, the Whitehall Hotel Tower, and Clear Lake, and empty again west of Clear Lake. 1950 Southern Boulevard Bridge, the new Southern Boulevard Bridge, the second Southern Boulevard Bridge went up. The third one hopefully will be finished next year. And the construction of that bridge certainly allowed the development of the southern end of the island. And one of the first things to be developed was Ibis Isle, once again by our friends at Bessemer Properties. And the Phipps family gave the land, Phipps Ocean Park, to the town of Palm Beach. Thank you very much. During 20 years later, 20 years after the demolition of the Royal Poinciana Hotel, finally the land that had been left vacant was developed. The southern half of 2/3 of it was developed by the Palm Beach Towers. Here you can see there's the slat house. That empty space was filled by the Royal Poinciana Plaza, designed by John Volk in 1957. And just next to it on the lake, the Palm Beach Royal Poinciana Playhouse, which is, I'm happy to say, finally supposed to be redeveloped. It was announced in the paper last week as a cultural and performing arts center, and I wish them well. So all that is left of the Royal Poinciana Plaza is the Slat House, and it's still Royal Poinciana Hotel, rather, is the Slat House, and it is still there. Other development that occurs, and now a few things happen. Zoning changes allowed apartments to be built in certain parts of town. And in 1963, the Condominium Act, the Florida Condominium Act passed. So a lot of apartment buildings were built and a lot of them converted into condos, and then a lot of condos were built. And so this shows you in the Royal Park addition, that is to say the space between Royal Palm Way and Worth Avenue, along the lake, those four major apartment buildings were built in a 15-year period. And then on the ocean, during 20 years, between 1960 and 1978, another half dozen major condominiums went up, including 3 by Michael Burroughs, who went to Harvard Business School, I believe, and therefore named his properties after houses at Harvard: Winthrop, Lowell, Dunster. And during that period, the Rainbow Pier, having been damaged by multiple hurricanes, was finally demolished, as was Lido Pools, which was across the street from the piers. And it is indeed in that very spot that Michael Burroughs built Winthrop House. And then further south, around Royal Poinciana Way, 11 high-rises went up more or less during the same period of time, a little bit later. Again, at the top, you've got the 6 that were built along the lake, and at the bottom, the 5 that were built along the ocean. And then south of Sloan's Curve, over 50 condominium buildings have gone up in the 70s and 80s. And that stretch goes all, as I mentioned earlier, all the way down to South Palm Beach. So it's a probably 5 miles, I would guess, of condos.
High rises.
So in 1974, Barbara Hofstadt wrote the first edition of her wonderful book, Landmark Architecture of Palm Beach, which is an impressive street-by-street compendium of architecture through Palm Beach architecture through 1945. And she made a plea in it for historic preservation. And in fact, 5 years later, the Historic Preservation Ordinance was passed by the Palm Beach, and the Landmark Commission was created at the same time. And it's only literally since 1979. So only 43 years that we have been protecting our heritage, our architectural heritage. Up until then, anything could happen. And let me show you some of the things that did happen to some of the great estates. And this is the last chapter, and I appreciate that we're well over an hour. But what happened to the great estates? Well, Croton Cottage, which is the oldest building, one of the very first buildings not built by Pioneer, but the certain buildings that was actually a serious, properly built building, was moved from the lake to the ocean, and it became one of the breakers' cottages that was rented out for the season on either side of the breakers. There were some south, some north. And then in the 1980s, the decision was taken to replace those, by the breakers, to replace those cottages with condominiums, Breakers Row 1 and Breakers Row 2. And fortunately for Palm Beach, the Preservation Foundation came to the aid of Seagull Cottage and packed it up, and in 1984 moved it back to the lake, not exactly where it was, but very close to where it was. right south of Whitehall. And it's now properly acknowledged as the oldest house in Palm Beach. Figalis, the earliest house built on the ocean in 1993 by Mr. Bingham, was damaged by fire and then finally demolished in 1975. The second church of Bethesda by the Sea still exists, but it's now a residence, a private residence right on Lake Trail. The wonderful Banyan's house, which was built by the Brailsfords, Mr. Brailsford in 1903, with money he got from Flagler for selling him Brailsford's Point, was demolished in 1975 before the preservation ordinance went into effect. Ohika on North Ocean Boulevard became Graham Eckey's school between 1941 and 1989. And after, when the school finally closed and the house became once again a private residence. Cielito Lindo, the magnificent estate just north of Mar-a-Lago on 16 acres, almost the same size as Mar-a-Lago. In 1947, Kings Road was built right through the middle of it. So you've got on the left part of the original estate, and on the right part of the middle estate, the original estate, which is a fairly unique approach. And the property was subdivided, so there are a lot of new houses as well as some of the old original houses. And the huge estate Playa Oriente, just north of the Palm Beach Country Club, 27 acres, was demolished and subdivided in 1957. El Mirasol, the Stokes Ferry estate, just north of Wells Road, was subdivided as well. The house was demolished and the land subdivided. And Casa Bendita, J. Phipps's estate, was similarly, the house was demolished and it was subdivided in two parts. Those of you who have been around for a while will remember that there's this totally untouched wilderness west of County Road, but certainly in the 50s until 1993, when finally the land was sold and subdivided to create the Phipps estate today. And here's a shot of 300 Royal Palm Way, 300 South Ocean Boulevard. On the left, this building designed by Howard Chilton, who designed so many buildings in the 60s in Central Palm Beach. Next to a house designed by Mizner and substantially changed by Facio La Fontana.
Thank you.
And the people finally, who lived in that house, finally gave up and sold it. And 100 Royal Palm Way replaced it in 1969. The Biltmore Hotel became the Biltmore Condominiums. Warden House, which Mizner designed as well, was subject to what is called an adaptive restoration, which is to say that the building itself was converted into 6, I believe, separate condominiums, which is Robert Eigelberger did the same thing with an adjacent estate called Bienestar. And both of them won awards from the Preservation Foundation. And Mar-a-Lago.
There we go.
So Marjorie Merriweather Post lived there until she was quite old, until 1973, 6 years after this picture was taken. And it was, of course, acquired by Donald Trump some years later,
Yeah.
and converted into a club. The Whitehall, with its 10-story unfortunate tower, was acquired, thank goodness, by Henry Morrison Flagler's granddaughter, Jean Flagler Matthews, in 1959. And she formed a nonprofit organization to transform the hotel once again into the splendid mansion that it once was, And the Whitehall Museum, sorry, the Flagler Museum opened in 1960. And finally, the Palm Beach County Courthouse in West Palm Beach that was built in 1916 was totally surrounded by this structure in 1969, which was because they needed more court space. And so this unfortunate structure was built entirely surrounding the original courthouse. And I'm happy to say that it was unwrapped over a 4-year period. And then finally in 2008,
Well,
it opened again in its splendid form, and it houses the Richard and Pat Johnson Palm Beach County History Museum, which I commend to you, because all these photos I've been showing have come from the Historical Society of Palm Beach County. So yes, Palm Beach went through just phenomenal growth spurts over the years, and it does not look like it's likely to continue, likely to stop anytime soon. And it looks indeed that given all the construction that's going on these days, that we might be in going through yet another boom period like we did in the 1920s. And all I can do is close with a plea that while we embrace the future, let us preserve our heritage and our history. Thank you very much.